up, guys? So in this video, we are going to dab into JavaScript. We're going to access some elements and properties, create statements, store and access data in variables, and create a function. So hold on to your hats and let's get started. Now, to retrieve data from or make changes to a web page element, we must first write code that identifies the specific object we want to work with. One of the most straightforward ways to reference an object is by using a CSS selector that identifies it, and that's what we're going to do today. We can also reference an object using an ID or class attribute value. But I know this probably all sounds foreign to you, so let's actually dive into the code and see how this works. First, we're going to access elements and properties using JavaScript. So let's take a look at the HTML document we're going to play with first. Now the top will look the same like the index file we've been playing with so far because I kept the same navigation and header element at the top. What changed is I made a very basic contact me form that shows the name, email, and feedback or questions. And then at the bottom, this is what we're going to play with. Right now it says to me, from, and it's blank, and the subject is feedback question, and then there's nothing below it. JavaScript is going to help us populate this preview window with the information the user puts in the field so that they can preview their submission once they've completed it. Now, the console is part of the developer tools in modern web browsers such as Chrome or Mozilla, and it can be used to enter test code and view error message related to JavaScript. So before we create a JavaScript document, let's practice referencing our objects and their properties using a browser console. Now to open our console on a Mac, and if you're in Firefox like I am, it's Option-Command-K. If you're on a PC, it's Control-Shift-K. Now if you're using Chrome, which I love to use Chrome as well, it's Control-Shift-J for PC, Option-Command-J for Mac. And then finally, if you're using Internet Explorer, it's F12, then Control-2. I've opened it up. And at first we'll see, of course, that it's blank. And then here at the very bottom, we'll see a command line that we can actually type. So what I'm going to actually type here now is document.query selector. And in the parentheses here, in quotes, I'm going to put H2. And then outside of the parentheses, it's a dot, and then text, content with a capital C. And then I'm just going to press enter. So what we did here is we specified a CSS selector in quotes within these parentheses here, within our query selector to reference an object. So it looked up on my page and it looked for the H2, which happens to be this section right here, and that value is contact me, so it returned the value of contact me. Pretty neat, right? Let's try another one just to make sure we get it. Let's type in document.query selector again, and then in parentheses this time, within quotes, let's put name input. Oh, and this is an ID that I made, so let's put a hashtag in front of it, and then .value. I'm going to hit enter here, and right now we notice it's blank because there is currently nothing in the name input. Now watch this. In the name field, I'm going to type something. I'm just going to go ahead and type my name, and then let's try this line of code again. I'm going to type in document.query selector, parentheses, hash name, input, another parentheses, close it, close quote, parenthesis, and then .value, and then enter. And this time, since there is information in that field, it returned what was in the field, which is my name, Melody Chronister. Neat, right? So this gives you an idea on how this JavaScript query works. So now let's try to create a statement. Once we create JavaScript code to access a property, we can add to the code to make changes to the property. So we can type code down here in the console and it will update the website. A statement is a JavaScript instruction that performs an action. One of the most common actions we can do with a JavaScript statement is assign a new property value. To do so, we use the assignment operator, which is simply an equal sign. The code on the left side of the equal sign accesses the property, and the code on the right side of the equal sign specifies the new value for that property. So let's see how this works. This time on the command line, we're going to type in document, should be getting pretty good at this by now, right? Query selector, and then in parentheses, I'm going to put in a class this time, so dot feedback / from, quote, parenthesis, and then class text content, so the period there, space equal space, and then let's put my name. Melody Chronister. And remember, the code on the left here references the text content of the element with the class value of feedback from, and the right of the equal sign is the value we want to assign to it. So if we scroll down here, see how this from is blank? We're going to populate it using this line of JavaScript code right here. So let's hit enter. Forgot to put the quote over here in front of my class ID. I thought I typed that. So document.query selector, parentheses, quote, quotes dot feedback from quote parenthesis dot text content equals melody chronister. Okay, now let's try it again. Hit enter. There we go. So I just hit enter and it populated my name right up here. So before it was blank, now it's populated, all using the JavaScript command line right here. Now let's dive into our text editor and play with the JavaScript from that angle. So I have a file here right now. It's blank. And notice up here at the top, I titled it script2.js. And on our top line here, I'm just going to type the same thing we've been practicing, document.querySelector. And within parentheses, I'm going to put in .feedback -from. Then outside of the parenthesis, I'm going to put my class text content equals, and in quotes, melody chronister. Now, since I'm in my JavaScript file this time, I need that semicolon, or it's not going to work. And since we're in here, let's type in one more line. Let's type in document.querySelector, parenthesis, quote, period, feedback, -content, and then outside the parenthesis, .text, content, and this time we're going to equal, do you do videos on Dreamweaver? And then again, don't forget the semicolon at the end. There we go. And then let's save this. Now we needed to reference it in our HTML document. So I'm going to jump in here to the contact.html document. I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom. And then just before this closing body tag, I'm going to put in a script with the source of this script file. And then within quotes, the name of the file, which was script2.js. And then close that script. And then that's it. And in case you hadn't watched my previous videos, the reason why we sometimes put scripts at the bottom is so then that way the page will load all the content first. So when they're on your site, they see all the content as fast as possible, and then it loads the script so that it helps with the lag time. So we're going to save that, and then we're going to go into our browser. This time we're going to close the console, and then let's refresh. And scroll down, and look. You see what that JavaScript file did? It manipulated the field and actually added the question, do you do videos on Dreamweaver? And then the from Melody Chronister. So we populated this field using this JavaScript language right here. Just 2 lines of code. Pretty neat, right? And that's how we create a statement. So now let's talk about storing and accessing data in variables, which are values that are stored that we can access with a name that we specify. Now, because shorter JavaScript statements are generally easier for developers to understand and troubleshoot, it's common to store object references as variables and then reference those objects in subsequent statements using variable names. In other words, we try to keep it simple. Now, for our variables, I'm going to actually move these 2 lines down here a few, and then above it, I am going to type our first variable. It's var space from value space equal space document.querySelector, parenthesis quote, .feedback -from, and then after that, a semicolon. So this code creates a variable called FromValue. As its value, it stores a reference to the element with the class value feedback from, which is an element that one of our existing statements down here modifies. Now let's type in one more. Var space feedback value equals document.querySelector, parenthesis, quote, and within the quotes, our class selector, feedback, content. And again, that semicolon at the end. So the only thing that changed here is at the beginning, we have from value, feedback value, and then the classes we're referencing are different. Feedback from, feedback content. Now notice down here, feedback from, those match, feedback content, those match. Now keep in mind, JavaScript variable names cannot include spaces. So when creating a name that contains multiple words, it's very common to use camel case. With camel case, we capitalize the first letter of each word, no spaces. Now that we have these built, we're going to actually go down here and delete this whole line of our statement and type in from value. And then down here, we're going to do the same thing, everything below the period gone, and then we're going to type in feedback value and then save. This change shortens our existing statement by replacing the element reference with a variable name. So let's save our changes and then refresh and reload our web page in our browser. Now, of course, because our code still has the same content, we notice this didn't change. That's what we wanted to see. The statements still work referencing the variables we have built up here. Now, although the page is unchanged, our statements are now much shorter and legible, which is what we like. So now let's talk about functions. As our JavaScript code becomes more complex, it's useful to be able to group multiple lines of code and reference them in a single unit. JavaScript enables us to do this by creating what's called a function, which is a group of one or more statements with an assigned name. Now, the contents of a function are not executed automatically when they are parsed by a browser. Instead, we must include a reference to that function name known as a function call. So let's group the two statements that we've created that adds text content in our preview section within a function, and then put in a function call to execute them. So let's go in here and indent this. I'm going to hit the space a few times. 3 is probably good. Hit enter, and let's type our function. Function, space, complete, and then preview in parentheses, and then our curly braces. So get a little bit of a CSS flair there, right? Now with this closing curly bracket, we want to actually delete that and put that below these two statements here. So now I'm going to close the curly bracket right there so that these statements are wrapped within the function. Now every function starts with the function keyword. Then the function name follows the keyword. A pair of parentheses follows the function name, and the first line of the function ends with an opening curly bracket. Then our statements are embedded in between, and then the last line of the function consists of a closing curly bracket. And remember, a function is not executed until it is called by a function call, which is a statement consisting of the name of the function. So we saved it, and let's preview it in our browser. Refresh, and look, now the content is gone, because again, it has not been told to execute yet, so the items are blank. So now let's go in here and put in our function call. Below our curly bracket here, let's type in the word complete, preview, parentheses, semicolon. This statement is a function call for the complete preview function. So now let's just save our changes and go in and refresh one more time and see what happens. And there we go, it's back because it was called upon to do so. And that's how we create a function. In the next video, we are going to take JavaScript a little further, so be sure to check that out. Until then, I will catch you later.